So, today we are going to talk a little bit about breathing and the pelvic floor. One of the most important things that I can stress, excuse me, for anyone who is learning to lift, starting to lift, getting back into lifting after having surgery, after having a baby, anything like that, is starting to focus on your breathing and focus on what your body is doing while you're doing that work. A lot of people have not spent any time thinking about their pelvic floor. They haven't spent any time thinking about their breath. They're just kind of going through the motions in a way that they feel like is helping to get their muscles stronger. But from a standpoint of people trying to get better and people trying to get stronger and really isolate the muscles that you're trying to isolate, we need to start with our breath. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanics of breathing with lifting. I'm going to talk a little bit about your pelvic floor and how that actually relates to your breath, how that relates to your ability to lift and to be able to lift heavy for any person, but especially as women. And I'm going to just touch for a moment on what is known as diastasis recti, as well as coning or doming. So first, we're just going to talk about the breathing mechanics. The first thing that I always like to talk about is the belly breath. The reason that when you're inhaling, we want your belly to relax and expand, we want your pelvic floor to relax, is because when you inhale this way, it allows you to have an exhale where you're allowing your core to come together, to allow your core to brace in a way that allows you to have stability for any of these lift activities. So inhaling, allowing your belly to expand, your pelvic floor to relax. Exhaling and engaging that core, allowing your ribs to kind of come down, bracing in a way that isn't just straining or bearing down. If you have been around lifting at all, you may have heard about something called a Valsalva maneuver, which is basically to just take a big breath in and then hold it and let everything contract. And that actually isn't what we want to do when we're attempting to generally, and there's exceptions for everything, generally when we're trying to lift. So we want to make sure that we can have our core itself engaged in a way that isn't holding our breath, in a way that isn't just activating muscles for the sake of stability, but allowing us to activate those muscles to be able to move your arms and your legs and your body separate from your stable core. Our core itself, I like to think of the core kind of like a soda can. You have the top, that's your diaphragm, the lower part, the muscle that lives underneath of your ribs. You have your pelvic floor, that's like the bottom of the can. And if you have ever seen a can that is ready to explode, right, you have the bottom of the can that kind of pokes out, but generally it's in that more rounded position, kind of up in the can. That's how our pelvic floor is. When we're thinking about your core, a lot of people think about six-pack abs. That is one layer of your core, but you have the front of your core, you have muscles that come down, you have muscles that go up, you have muscles that wrap around the backside. Your back muscles are part of your core. Your core is really that cylinder around your midsection. So we're thinking ribs on the top, pelvic floor on the bottom, and then your abs going all the way around. All of that is your core. And if you have ever tried to multitask, you know that doing multiple things at once is really hard. Luckily, over time, we as humans generally get better at multitasking. We have more ability to have our brain thinking about multiple things at once. The same thing goes for your core. When you first start and your brain says core activate, usually everything all activates at once, and we don't want it to just be a one switch to turn on, if that makes sense. We want your brain to say, okay, I'm activating my diaphragm, I'm activating my pelvic floor, I'm activating those core muscles to be able to provide pressure. When we're thinking about some of those things that I was talking about at the beginning, the diastasis recti, the coning, the doming, which I'm going to go into in just a moment, those aren't a condition that we magically fix. We're not going to be altering our bodies, the way that our body is structured with those things. The bigger thing is having a balance of pressure from the inside out and from the outside in. So diastasis recti, I'll just touch on that now, typically happens after a woman has been pregnant and given birth. It can also happen with any abdominal surgeries and for many other medical conditions, but the most common typically we think about is with pregnancy, because your body has to change, rearrange the ligaments, the fascia, the tendons, the muscles. They all move around to be able to accommodate a growing baby. So when we think about those six-pack abs, they sit on the front of our belly. And when you become pregnant, they kind of stretch out to the side to allow your belly to get bigger. So when they're sitting out on the side, the fascia that's in the middle leaves an opening. Okay, so not that we need to be concerned that all your guts are going to spill out or anything like that, but it leaves an opening there. And I think the way that diastasis has been talked about, or the way that people see it, is that they want their diastasis fixed. They want that separation to come back together. And from a physical standpoint, you can't magically make the muscles that are out here come back together. Your body has changed. You have had a baby. That being said, that ability to activate your ab muscles and have good balance between the pressure that's on the inside and the pressure that's on the outside allows you to engage your core in a way that doesn't let there to be a space in the middle. People often, when they're getting assessed for diastasis, somebody will, with their abs, kind of push their fingers down in between them when they're contracting. And the further in you're able to go, the worse your diastasis is. But it really is, when you're activating those muscles, we also want the deeper core muscles to activate, to be able to provide extra layers of help, to be able to provide pressure from the outside, so that when you're bracing from the inside, your body isn't starting to get into that cone position. The cone is because the pressure on the inside of you is more than your abs can counter on the outside of you. And so really, I think about coning and doming. Doming is kind of down in the lower abs. Coning typically is more in those six-pack type of abs. I think of those things more as a pressure mismatch rather than your muscles just not doing their job. And that's one of the things that we like to work on with breath. So with that, the big thing that I want you to take away from this is, when you're inhaling, you want your belly to expand. You want your pelvic floor to relax. I always tell people to think about it this way, and this sounds kind of silly, but when you're laying there, think about a time that you have really needed to go to the bathroom. It's happened to everybody. You know, you had a bunch of water because it's warm outside, and then you think, oh no, I really have to go. Our body naturally kind of tightens everything up, and you're holding it. And I know you know the feeling of when you sit down onto the toilet and you kind of just let everything go. That is what we want to be doing when we're inhaling. When you're inhaling, you're allowing your belly to expand. You're allowing your pelvic floor to relax just like you would when you're going to the bathroom. That's the inhale. When you're exhaling, you want to think about from the very front of your pelvic bone, thinking about zipping up towards your belly button, allowing your ribs at the top of that soda can and your pelvic floor at the bottom of your soda can to come together. That's what allows you to get that good brace and what allows you to be able to engage your core. That is the basic of that belly breathing, the pelvic floor breathing. My recommendation for you is to start in a laying down position. You can have your knees bent, your feet on the floor. Everything is nice and relaxed. Close your eyes as you're doing this. Inhale, let your belly expand. Let your pelvic floor relax. Exhale, think about zipping up from that pelvic bone all the way up towards your ribs. Inhale with your belly open. Exhale, zipping up. This is the place that we start with the pelvic floor being able to contract and relax, because any time that you do an exercise, you want to be able to think about this breath and where you would add your inhale in an exercise and where you would add your exhale in an exercise. Typically, and this is the last thing, I wanted to keep this short. Typically, when you're doing this, the inhale is through the motion where you're getting into the work position. The exhale is when you're doing the hard work. So if we're thinking about a deadlift, you're coming down, you're getting the bar from the top down to the floor. That's the inhale. When you're about to lift that strong, heavy weight off of the ground, that's when you're bracing, and that's when you're doing your exhale. Remember, as you're doing this, as you're doing any exercise, as you're thinking about your pelvic floor breathing, slow the exercise down to match your breath. Don't breathe faster to meet the speed that you think you should be going with your exercise. We want to make sure that you give your body enough time to really brain to muscle wise have a good conversation. The more you're able to practice this, the easier it will be. But at the beginning, you really need to slow things down and be intentional about, okay, I'm breathing in here, letting everything relax. I'm breathing out here, letting everything brace, and then I'm lifting that weight. If you have any questions about the pelvic floor, about breathing, about lifting, if you are working on doing some exercises and you're not quite sure which part you inhale on, which part you exhale on, please feel free to contact me. I think it's insanely important to be able to understand this when you're first getting started, because it's really hard to switch this around once you have figured it out or once you have started. Mostly because I find a lot of people are breathing the opposite of the way that they need to be. And getting this started right away is going to be really, really, really helpful. So if you would like to contact me, you can find me at breakoutptandwellness.com, or you can send me an email at sam@breakoutptandwellness.com.